everyone, it's Janessa with What's Happening in Williston, and today I am here with Brandon Delvo. He is the marketing director here at Williston State College, but he also wears many hats in the historical sense of Williston. He's on the Fort Union Muzzle Loaders and the Fort Union Association, and I just really wanted to take the time today to visit with him in regards to the history of the area, along with the Fort Union Rendezvous that is coming up in our community. So Brandon, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me.
Yeah, thanks, Janessa. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's get started in first about Fort Union. What is it? What's the historical significance here in Williston? Yeah.
So I usually like to start these things out with kind of an analogy for people, where if you draw a straight line on a piece of paper and that signifies time, or really, as long as we've been a country, 240, 250 years of existence. But if you put a line in the middle, that's like the American Civil War. If you put a line before that, that's the American fur trade, that's Fort Union, things like that. And then if you put kind of a mark after that big one of the Civil War, you might be talking about Fort Buford, the railroads, things like that. And I like to mention that because we really cover well over 100 years of that 250 year existence, really, that we've been a country. I mean, so that this nice little spot of northwest North Dakota encapsulates a lot of that American historical experience. And you're mentioning Fort Union. Fort Union really comes about just due to simple economics. You have the American fur trade going on, and what's the fur trade? You essentially, in a nutshell, have a demand for furs to make certain goods like hats. Fur hats, quality beaver hats were a sought out item out on the East Coast and over in Europe. And then you have trade goods, which the Indians need. So we're symbiotically fulfilling a relationship that serves two purposes. The Native Americans and the Plains Indian tribes are getting what they need, and then by them bringing in those furs, the fur company is getting that. If we go before Fort Union is built, Lewis and Clark come through here in 1805 and 1806, and they make note of the area out there by the confluence of the Missouri and the Yellowstone, essentially saying that this would be a suitable area for a fort. They're both military officers. They can survey the terrain. They've already been doing this for months at a time on the expedition, so they're very, very good at what they're doing. And now we fast forward to 1828, and at the request of the Assiniboine Indians, with the help of the American Fur Company, through a gentleman by the name of Kenneth McKenzie, who was head of the Upper Missouri outfit at the time, the Assiniboines essentially say, we need you to build a trading post here. This is a good, suitable spot. Kenneth McKenzie starts this, though, in October of 1828. Well, we know how our seasons are up here in northwest North Dakota. He's a little bit behind the gun on getting this thing built. But it gets built in 1828, and really for 39 years, it's a bastion of peaceable coexistence between European Americans, or white European Americans, and the Northern Plains Indians tribes. We're trading everything here from a simple mouse hide all the way up to buffalo hides. And throughout those 39 years, I mean, we cover a lot of things are happening in America. America is changing, America is evolving, technology is coming around. But what really helps kick off that fur trade is the arrival of steamboats. Steamboats are basically our I-94s, our I-29s of the day. So with that launch of steamboat traffic, really accelerates the fur trade. And we're seeing where hundreds of thousands of dollars in furs are being traded annually at Fort Union. So it's essentially the Walmart of its day. Mm-hmm. And that's really important, that it is around for 39 years, which is a really long run.
Yes, well, especially back in that day. So it was in existence basically from 1828, you said, to roughly 1860?
Yep, around 1866. The Civil War is over by this time.
Okay.
There really is not a need for, the fur trade's kind of in its waning days.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, with the Civil War being over, America really takes a look to the West.
Okay.
I mean, we've just gone through 4 years of just horrific, bloody fighting, brother against brother, and America is looking for, obviously expanding. Railroads are expanding, so the Transcontinental Railroad's being built at this time. In 1862, Abraham Lincoln opens up the Homestead Act. That essentially opens the door wide open for settlement. So people are turning their attention west, but at the same time, government policy is turning things west as well. So this is where you get essentially the early infancy of Fort Buford being built, is right at the end of the Civil War. So in existence between 1828 to about 1866, 1867.
Okay, great. And so after that, so I know Fort Union was then dismantled, right? Put into Fort Buford down the road. When did the whole reconstruction of that come about?
So I like to say this, and I mean I'm a fairly newcomer to a lot of the people in town that are here or have passed away or have just moved on. But really the reconstruction, from what a gentleman by the name of Dave Finders, who's been a member of the Muzzle Loaders really since it started, likes to say that the stars aligned perfectly to get that fort rebuilt. There was a lot of things done locally. The community got behind it. They got behind the history of the area. There was a lot of work done with gentlemen like Marv Kaiser, Paul Hedren, who was the superintendent at the site at the time, that they spent a lot of their own money, went out to Washington, D.C., lobbied our members of Congress, and essentially a lot of those moving pieces, community involvement and fundraising, a lot of the lobbying side of it helped to make that, the archaeology happened, and then pretty much getting that partially rebuilt. It's not a full reconstruction. There are some buildings that their outlines are there, but that reconstruction in itself just gives you kind of the immense scale of what that building would have looked like over 150 years ago.
Okay. Are there any big name historical figures that might have passed through Fort Union?
Yeah. Really even before Fort Union was built, I mean, that whole confluence area was a site of other forts that were built.
Okay.
One of the earliest being Fort Henry.
Okay.
And I always like to bring that up because I know The Revenant is a popular film. It has connections with the Park Service and whatnot here. In that Hugh Glass story, after he's mauled by the grizzly bear, in the movie you kind of see this, this fort encapsulated by mountains, when Hugh Glass returns to civilization. Well, he was mauled by that bear down by Lemon, South Dakota. He returns to Fort Henry. He returns here.
Oh, okay.
I mean, and Fort Henry was around between 1822, 1824.
Okay.
So we have Hugh Glass up here. Hugh Glass was also documented as coming through Fort Union during its time. Numerous individuals. There may be more popular, from a historical aspect, or for me being a historian, but men like Jim Beckworth was an African-American mountain man, also a member of the Crow tribe.
Okay.
I mean, lots of individuals. There's a gentleman by the name of Alexander Harvey, and he's got a fiery temper. He ends up killing a man out there. Men like Charles Larpenter. Charles Larpenter, you can get 40 Years a Fur Trader out at the bookstore, or the actual journal that the late Mike Kassler and Dr. Raymond Wood wrote. But Charles Larpenter started as a clerk at an opposition company post near Fort Union, essentially gets put into free agency, gets picked up by the American Fur Company, and essentially spends those whole 39 years up on the upper Missouri up here. And his journal is a classic of knowing what's going on at any given time. And he talks about various historical things. The killing of the Deschamps family is a story that's in there that maybe isn't as widely known. The Alexander Harvey incident. There's all these different things in there, but these are maybe more celebrities in my eye, but they leave us a very valuable history of what took place out there, and a lot of those people that came and went through those doors.
Yeah, well, and who came and went through our area, because Williston, was first discovered in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Williston was found. So this is all history that happened in our area prior to this community developing, and then the history with the, like you said, the fur trade, how that all worked, Lewis and Clark, the Native Americans. It just really shows how our area up here has such a robust history. So
absolutely.
So if individuals kind of want to learn about that history, of course, each year is the Fort Union Rendezvous. Do you want to kind of talk on that and what community members can expect? Yeah,
absolutely, Janessa. So Fort Union is located roughly 23 miles southwest of Williston. It's off Highway 1804. You can't miss it. The big white walls and the bastions. I mean, like they used to say, the Great White House on the Prairie. That it still looks that way, it's essentially situated around a backdrop that has been untouched since the fort was built. So you get a lot of that sense. And Fort Union Rendezvous this year is June 15th through the 18th out at Fort Union Trading Post National Historic Site. And a lot of what you can see at Fort Union Rendezvous, you're really going to see the fort come to life. I've been doing living history for well over 15 years. The Fort Union Muzzle Loaders, a local living historical group, will be there, along with a lot of other living historians that do kind of that anywhere from 1820s up through 1840s time period out there. They come from all over the country. We cover a wide array of knowledge, know-how, experience that we bring to the table. And essentially what we want the public to walk away with is, I mean, you can read about something, but when you really get the sights, the smells, you utilize all those senses out there, and you see us, doing primitive camping, you see us doing primitive cooking, and doing some of the various demonstrations that will be taking place out there, you really walk away with a better sense of what that time period was like. There's numerous events throughout those days of the rendezvous. June 15th, which is a Thursday, I believe, that's Kids Day. So a lot of, if you got kids, please feel free to come out. There's a lot of us that do various different stations where you really walk away with, it has something tied historically to the area.
Yeah, and I remember bringing my nieces and nephews out there during Kids Day, and they had plenty where you could see the weaving of different blankets. You were, guiding kids through, okay, these are the different furs that we saw at Fort Union. I believe that there's like a canoe or boat demonstration that also goes on. So what were some of the furs that were really popular in our area?
Well, obviously there's a need when the fort's in existence for beaver hides. So beaver trapping is very, very popular. But then kind of when that market ebbs away slightly, buffalo come up as a sought out commodity. And I mean, buffalo hides are used for numerous things, coats, whatnot. I mean, it's a very, very durable leather. It's a very durable material. I mean, this is an animal that has biologically been on the northern plains for, it's evolved over millions of years. So this animal is suited for the extremes of our seasons up here. But really, I mean, beaver and buffalo, but I mean, there's numerous other ones, everything from deer hides to fox. And what Janessa was talking about earlier with Kids Day and going through the furs, we were doing essentially Indian Sign Language, which was telling, various children about the basic way to communicate in those days was through sign language. We think that nowadays we have interpreters and different things. A lot of things were simply done with saying things like yes, maybe, no, and that's how people communicated back then. So we go through all these various animal hides, and I know the most popular one is usually the skunk, because the skunk in sign language it smells bad. That's one part of what a skunk is, but kids walk away with a little more of a sense of what went on out there. And I always like to say, if we maybe hook one or two kids that are like, I want to know more about this, or I want to read about this, or Mom, Dad, can you take me out there again some other time? That might be a future living historian someday. That might be somebody who wants to maybe get into the humanities in college and maybe pursue a history degree. So, because we got to keep that history going, we have to keep that history alive up here, and the best way to do it is educating our children.
And so what are some of the key pieces of history that have been pulled from the Fort Union site?
Oh man, I mean, there's numerous things that have been pulled from the archaeology. What I can really say to maybe encapsulate all that is, anytime you do archaeology on a site, whether it's Fort Union, whether it's Fort Buford, you're walking away with a cross section of what life was like. What people maybe ate, what people maybe used as eating utensils. Cups. I mean, we've seen where there was a degree of fine china brought up the river. I mean, we think of these places maybe through Hollywood and other things as being these crude, rudimentary places. They're dirty and filthy, which, don't get me wrong, some of these places were, but I mean they took in the fineries of life no different than we do nowadays. So we really, it opens you up. It's kind of like going in a time machine. It opens you up to a different time period. And it's always at every little turn, oh, what's next? What's next? What are we going to find next? I mean, it might be something as trivial as, oh, they used a certain type of nail, or, oh, we found a part of a trade gun, or something like that. And that's really important for a lot of us on the historical side, because we have a more definite answer as to what certain things were being used up here when the fort was in operation. Okay.
So if the community members are interested in learning more about the history, or if they're interested in becoming somebody that possibly partakes in the reenactments or those different kind of things, what is the best way for them to get involved?
So yeah, the best way, Fort Union Muzzle Loaders have a Facebook page. You can just basically go up in your search queue and type in Fort Union Muzzle Loaders. We meet, I believe it's the second Wednesday of every month at the James Memorial Library at 7:30 is when we have our monthly business meetings. I'd even just make a plug too, just even for the Fort Buford 6th Infantry Association. That's the other living historical group here in town, and they're obviously connected to Fort Buford and its history, but really a lot of us, where we come together is just the overall history of the Confluence area. And the Fort Buford 6th Infantry meets at the new armory the first Thursday of every month at 7:30. The best way to just get involved is to come to a meeting, introduce yourself. We're very friendly people. I know we wear historical clothing and look different sometimes, but we're very approachable. We love to talk about what we do. We love to educate the public. And if you want to be a part of that experience, by all means, come to one of those meetings, and we can kind of help get you started from there.
Okay. Well, do you have anything else that you'd like to add for our community members?
I say if you have not been out to either Fort Union or Fort Buford, please come out and visit those sites. I think you'll be really impressed with what you would walk away with, just knowing how special our area is up in this corner of northwest North Dakota, really to the whole big overall American historical experience. So come on out, visit your historical sites.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, I really appreciate you taking the time with me to visit about this and to educate us on Fort Union, the significance of its history, and what community members can expect for the Fort Union Rendezvous coming up the 15th through the 18th, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Well, we hope to see everybody there. Thank you again, Brandon.
Yep. Thanks, Janessa. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. There we go.